We're live. Hello. Welcome to the games industry panel. I'm Rob, CEO of Huey Games, and I'm very excited to have an esteemed panel of leaders from some great companies in the north of England. So perhaps we'll all start with an introduction, and I'm going to go round on the boxes that I've got on screen. So starting with Dave. From Real Time.
Hello, I'm Dave Collinane. I'm the executive producer here at Real Time UK. We're an animation studio. We've got 2 studios in the Northwest, primarily working with the games industry, most famously, but we also work in film and TV and also the automotive industries. I look after games, so we work with clients making video games, trailers, cinematics, keyframe animation services, all sorts of different things.
Great. Thank you, Dave. And Arthur?
I'm Arthur Parsons. I am the former head of design at TT Games. I was there for 22 years. I recently left to sit and play video games for a little while and then find a new exciting adventure. I've made an awful lot of family-friendly video games that people will know and love. And had the pleasure of working with Rob for 4 or 5 years a little while ago.
Great, thanks, Arthur. I'm going to go to Matthew Benson next.
Hey, so I'm Matthew Benson. I'm the marketing commercial director for Firesprite Games. We're an independent games developer, been established about 10 years now. I've been there for a couple of years. So we're a new generation console platform focused studio, co-developing and creating our own games, basically.
Brilliant. And finally, Matt Knott.
Afternoon. I'm the development director at Necronox Studios up in Manchester. We are a AAA game studio, so we are co-developers with a number of our co-dev partners, and we also are in the throes of making our own IP as well.
Brilliant. Thanks for the intro. So I'm going to start off with the first question, which is kind of the big obvious one that's affected all of us in some way over the last year and a half, which is of course COVID-19 and the impact that's had on the games industry in particular. How has COVID impacted you as a company, and how do you think it's impacted the wider industry? I'll go back to Matt Knott to begin that one.
Cool, thanks. I was hired over COVID, so I've had a very successful lockdown. But also, I say from an industry point of view, it's proved that it can adapt quickly. It's pretty robust as an industry. We've all proved out we can work from home, and that we can do that successfully. I think games have proved that they have the power to bring people together as well. So this is clear from the uplift in games across the world. So I think I think it's probably brought the games industry 5 years ahead, the pandemic, in terms of growth. So negatively, I think we're still to see the impact of long-term effects of working from home. I'm curious about how the creative process is going to kind of step up to the mark with, working through screens. For that matter, the students, the new blood coming into the industry as well, how that's affected the last intake, how it will affect the new intake. So I'm kind of curious as to see. I don't think we'll see that for a couple of years yet, but I'm also keen to. I'm so keen to get back into the studio. I'm in the studio today, so I'm kind of making a move back from working from home, I suppose.
Great. That's great. And I think, as you say, the games industry, in a lot of ways, we've been quite fortunate to see perhaps a net benefit from that, with people staying at home and playing games. David, what's been your interpretation of that?
The games industry as a whole it's been a pretty good, solid success story over the last year, really, hasn't it? I mean, it's been phenomenal growth. People are just playing a lot more games, so it's good for business. It's good for all of us, really. It's been quite successful in that, for us as a business, we've been able to kind of get hold of a lot more talent easily, because people can work remotely from home quite successfully. And with that comes, we're not confined by geography anymore. We can work with talent throughout the world, and it can work seamlessly as part of our production. So from that side of things, it's been pretty solid. I mean, negatively, we're not being able to travel more. Obviously, we can't. We've got clients all over the world, really. Quite a few in China. So obviously, travel and meeting those clients is really slowed down now. So that's been a real negative. But I think as a whole, I mean, as Matt says, it's accelerated the industry by about 5 years. I mean, some industries have been negatively affected by this, obviously, but for us personally, it's been great, really. Without sounding too smug about it, because I have quite a few calls with clients, and we're all like, yeah, things are okay. We're doing okay. I mean, it's not really personally negatively affected us, really.
Yeah, I'm sure there are some sectors of the games industry, events and retail that have perhaps suffered. But as a whole, Ukie released their report that it had grown by 30% in 2020 and was £1 billion more than the previous record in terms of the UK industry.
Yeah, it all depends on what sector you're in. I mean, if you're in esports, which has been a fantastically growing industry over the last few years, I mean, it's really suffered over the last year.
Yeah.
Arthur, I'm interested in terms of your previous role at TT. As you said, we worked together there for a little while. I had the privilege of being there for about 4 years, and I know it's a big, successful company in the north of England. It's got great culture and looks after its people. But I'd just be interested, how challenging was that transition to working from home with hundreds of people across multiple studios?
It was a logistical challenge. But yeah, the IT guys were fantastic, and we were basically as a studio of nearly 500 people, we were up and running within 48 hours, which is a fantastic achievement. And during the entire course of lockdown, there was a lot of positives. There was actually a massive increase in communication levels, because obviously getting that number of people across 4 different sites together was always a challenge. So obviously Zoom and other sort of software was brilliant to bring people together. There were departments that sort of felt that they weren't necessarily involved as much in the day-to-day when we were in the office, that felt sort of a bigger part, things like the cutscene department, the audio department, people like VFX, and they're all super important, but they're never really there in the day-to-day, so they felt included. So that was a massive sort of improvement. But as we went on, we obviously found that it took its toll, the working from home, whereas loads of people loved it. The sort of the younger people, maybe those that are single, living with their parents, working from the bedroom or in a flat in Manchester, that didn't have that social interaction, that sort of took its toll a little bit. So we had to put a lot of things in place to sort of really support people, which was really good. So yeah, it was good, but obviously with a bit of a caveat, and obviously the fact that a global pandemic is never a good thing generally. But in terms of how it's affected the industry, the acceleration to digital is it's visible for everyone. Having worked at a company where most of our sales were coming from gifters, whether it be grandparents at Christmas or things like that, to see a significant uptake, and the fact that it was digital driven, it really has accelerated the industry, especially for where I was at with TT, and it's seeing whether that sticks. All these new gamers that have come, because there's a lot of new gamers. It's not just existing gamers. It's people that they've watched their box set on Netflix 6 times, and they've expended Netflix and Amazon and whatever else, and they've come to games, new gamers. I saw that lovely report about grandparent gamers the other day, which I thought was fantastic. So there's a lot of new gamers. Are they going to stick around? I really hope so.
Well, I did read a report the other day that they reckon the boom is here to stay, because I think it has, one of the benefits is that a whole bunch of people have been exposed to games they would never have considered playing them before. So from that's a very exciting thing, really, that in itself.
Yeah, Strauss Zelnick at Take-Two, in his earnings call the other day, they expect it to be permanent. So I think there's quite a lot of growing sentiment around those.
Yeah,
around that outcome.
Yeah, it does seem to be that sense that, I mean, the industry was growing anyway and has been for decades. And so it's an acceleration of that growth. And we do tend to keep new players when we bring them in. So I think there's a lot of positivity around that. And Matthew, I mean, what have been the challenges for you? What have been your observations during COVID?
We were pretty fortunate. We were looking around at the, particularly like last year around GDC when Sony pulled out very early doors, and everyone kind of made everybody look and go, whoop. So, we set up a small steering team to look at, preparedness for going remote. And we were all in place pretty much and had everybody out the studio safely, again, up and running across. I think we moved out before the lockdown actually occurred. So everybody was in place and working, and we have continued to hire as well during the pandemic. So we've added like a further 90 odd staff. So we're topping over 200 now in our studio. We've actually outgrown. The challenge for us is we've actually outgrown the premises we're at in Liverpool at the moment. So, for us, it's thinking about when we do return to the studio, how that hybrid model of, introducing flexibility for staff and the very practical tasks of, kind of workstation setups for people like artists, and coders, and how that, could coexist with home working. So, we don't see these as insurmountable. I've been surprised that there's been a couple of companies who've sort of cited COVID as a reason for the delay to their games, and I could imagine there are challenges for departments like QA that need access to equipment that may need securing, and many to kind of switch between different platforms to test. But I'm sure as an industry we're massively innovative and we can find ways around this and ways to cope with this new reality, which I think is here to stay. And it has, I think, positively, echoing what the guys have said, acceleration to digital sales, people that have churned into gaming and see how great it is. Hopefully they will stay. Negatively, I know there's a lot of these smaller kind of SMEs that go to the likes of GDC and Gamescom to cut deals, and haven't been able to do that. And there undoubtedly will have been an impact on that. But, the upside is you can see it, with the investment market is just frothy as hell, at the moment. Like VCs and investors can't get enough of games. So, it's taking its time, but it's glad to see that we're not, perceived as some kind of poorer cousin to movies and TV. That we're an innovative kind of industry in our own right, and we can bring different experiences that are, these other mediums, not to do these other mediums down. I've got all the Netflix and Disney and all those accounts, and we gorge and all that stuff too. But it's great to see gaming, as in a place where I think it deserves the kudos, to be honest.
Yeah,
Sorry, Dave, go on.
Just to echo on that, it is quite an exciting time from that point of view, because I think, I remember that I've been in the industry long enough to recognize that back in the day, film and TV was superior to games somehow, but I don't think that's the case anymore. Video games is always driving the technology that's going to impact on lots of other industries that this particular event is talking about, like fashion and things like that. So we've been investing a lot in with Unreal technology, and I think that's a very exciting time to be involved with that, because it is driving so much innovation and creativity across all sorts of different sectors, really. And it's the games industry that's really, that's obviously invented that created it effectively.
Yeah, look at the Mandalorian. In real
exactly.
tech, right? There's virtual screens that they're using for everything now. Incredible.
Yeah. So, just on that note, you're talking about expanding. We've been growing over the last year, and COVID has just shifted the way in which we do expand. Because we were physically building a second studio to house all this extra talent we were going to have. But then we started thinking, well, this hybrid working from home model might work, and we can use that space for a VR studio, for instance, or whatever. It could be, motion capture studio. There's all sorts of possibilities now. So it's quite an exciting time.
And we've just got an audience question in the chat here as well, which is there's a common theme of talent that keeps rising in this panel. When and if you decide people come back to the office for the culture side, how do we introduce flexibility of home working and keeping a good balance? Who wants to jump in on?
That's a $64 million question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you ask your staff. How they want to work. I mean, we trust them. You know, we're probably the smallest team. Probably Arthur on his own is probably smaller than us, but you know, we have got a small team. We're 20 strong, and everybody's working from home. We've got an international team. We've got people working overseas and Scotland. And I think the thing that we've been doing across the pandemic is asking our staff how they're doing and where they are right now, because where they were back in January is different now. And if you keep on talking to the people that you're working with specifically about that, about how they feel about coming back to the studio, there's no surprises then. It's just going to be a conversation. And I'd also say we've scoped out some scenarios. You know, would people be happy to come back full time? Would people be happy to come back, have a pool of laptops, people can go work remote? Or do people just want to work from home all the time? Either way, you know, we've got to see you at some point, hopefully. So the idea would be that we have various scenarios that we play out and we support people in that.
I think what you're saying there is right, Matt. It's engaging with the staff, because there are some people, you know, that are going to be desperate to sort of get back to the studio. There are some people that are going to have suddenly found like a massive uplift in their work-life balance. You know, they're not going to be sat, you know, on the M60 for, you know, an hour and a half of their day or wherever it is that they're commuting from. And finding that balance is going to be right. And I think what's more likely to happen is there's going to be probably a sizable investment in office infrastructure to allow hybrid, where you've got, you know, there's a few people dialing in from Zoom in a meeting room, and there's like 6 or 7 people in the room actually physically, and just about creating an environment where people can come and work, but it's not going to stop people working remotely. I think it's going to change things, you know, drastically moving forwards, and for the better. You know, everyone's going to be able to comfortably fit, you know, their sort of like work time in, but also really improve their sort of like, you know, their mental well-being and their work-life balance, and that's absolutely vital. Ultimately,
that will impact on, you know, some sort of positive thing for creativity, really, because what we do is a creative industry, right? I'm back in the day when I was on the development side, the expectation was you'd be working crunch hours from like ridiculous o'clock in the morning till ridiculously late at night, all piled into one room, and it wasn't very nice. You know, we're talking like 20 odd years ago, obviously, but things are changing now. So we have this more flexible environment. I think that's one of the positive outcomes from COVID, is that, you know, this situation that Arthur's just described is, you know, it's going to be a lot more flexible, and that's going to give birth to a lot more creativity, I think.
Yeah, we've, you know, we did poll our staff internally, and we've done it frequently about their intentions. I think what we've decided is important is that we are going to go back at our own pace. We're not going to go back as and when the government dictates it.
Exactly.
We're going to go back when we're ready, and when we have, you know, set upon the right workflows and processes and communications, and everything's kind of in place. So I think the challenge probably will be the hybrid model of working for very practical things like daily stand-ups, you know, reviews, and you know, trying to recapture those organic moments when someone's walking past your machine and you're like, come here and have a look at this. What do you think? You know, trying to capture those ad hoc kind of creative moments. So I think that's going to depend on the size of the business you are, you know, and as I think as Matt alluded to. So I think it's going to be a little bit of different strokes for different folks, but I would just say it's good to approach it from intrinsically like at your pace as a business, and not be, you know, sort of feel external pressures to go back, because we'll get that incoming flood of media saying, right, you know, the headlines will be everyone back to work and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, whereas we've all been working already really hard, because the games industry always does. So, I'm be really excited to see how it progresses in this kind of new world.
I think
there's creative businesses that dictate when people are going to go back. They're the ones that are going to suffer, I think, because I think you've got to have, everyone's response to COVID has been different. So you've got to have a bit of empathy, because some people might not feel threatened by the COVID situation. Some people do. And, it's everybody's different and individual, and everyone has their own different response. So, I mean, you can't just say, okay, you're going back to work now, you feel safe, because that's not necessarily going to be the case, is it? So
I think that's what's great about everyone in this group is everyone's mentioned well-being. I think a lot of the businesses that are really going to thrive will be kind of thinking about that and actually genuinely, walking the walk as well as talking the talk, I think. So it's great to hear.
Great stuff. And so, we've talked about how the perception of games has changed, and there's investment coming into the industry, and perhaps we've accelerated forward 5 years. But just moving a little bit away from COVID now, what are some of the new innovations in the game space that you see emerging over the next few years? So I'll maybe start with Matt on that one. Matt Knott.
Well, I suppose, I think esports will come back with a bang. I think there'll be a big uplift. Although it's been hard times for those guys, but I think it'll come back with a vengeance. I also feel like there's going to be a bit of an explosion in sort of cross-platform IP. So film, TV, games. I know has been some of that, but I think it's going to go wild again, basically because film and TV will start to open again, and there'll be a clamour. Production has been slow for the last 12 months or so on film and TV. Lots of optioned films and TV shows have been postponed. They're going to start up again, and you're going to see a lot more clamour for games-related stuff around the IP. And also think blockchain is going to start to permeate in much greater way. So that's my emerging predictions for the next few years.
What about you, Arthur? What are your thoughts?
It's going to be really interesting because one of the things that I think is going to really take over is gaming on the go, because we're all in the business of creating content, and the public are there basically digesting content, whether it is their streaming services. But I think what we're going to see is far more sort of creative, sort of what I'd sort of term as together experiences, where you actually can get together with people, whether they're together like actually literally, or whether it's just online. But gaming on the go, give it 10, 15 years, we're all going to be in electric cars that are driving themselves. We're all going to be in electric buses. To be fair, there's an electric plane, I believe, that flies itself or something. I don't know. But anyway, you're going to be digesting content, and gone are the days where you're going to be playing that ropey game from like 30 years ago really badly on your seat on the aeroplane. Companies like HoloLens that are going to bring gaming properly into cars, that's going to be something exciting. There's loads of stuff going on in the VR and AR space, but until that becomes like affordable but also accessible to the masses, it's not going to really get anywhere. But gaming on the go is going to get somewhere. As we bring in 5G, as we actually get really good sort of internet connectivity, and people are going to be wanting those big blockbuster sort of experiences on the go. And I think that's going to be somewhere that there's going to be lots of people have a lot of great success with. And like I say, the sort of together side. And then when it does come to blockchain, I think there's probably thousands of companies that are just heavily going into sort of NFTs, blockchains, and trying to come up with the magic formula. Then you're going to end up with one or two big boys, and then a lot of probably really unhappy faces, because not everyone's going to be able to get there. So whether that becomes a big thing or whether it's going to be an overnight thing, I don't know. But I really think gaming on the go, true handheld connected gaming, wherever you are in the wilderness or in the tube, whatever, that's where we're going to see some sort of big creative endeavors, I think.
Good stuff. Dave, what are your thoughts?
I think personally, I'm still, it's an old technology, but it's a continually developing technology. But I really I'm excited by the possibilities of Unreal, really, and the fact that it's being embraced by so many creative sectors outside of games. Games clearly invented it. It's Epic's baby at the end of the day, but with the investment from Tencent and all sorts, it's growing exponentially. We're using it on the automotive side of our business, so we make car configurators, for instance. We use it on the film and TV side for virtual studios, virtual sets and things, and we're using it for all sorts of different solutions. And I think that's going to grow even more in things like fashion and all sorts of things, and even for back in games. I mean, it's no longer a barrier that you have to make your own video game engine to make these great ideas for games. You can just literally pluck it off the shelf. It's free. You can make a great game. It's I think it's just really exciting. I think.
Matthew.
Agreed on Unreal. That Nanite stuff looks incredible. In terms of the way it may change workflows. So, because we're in Unreal Studio as well, primarily. So I echo your comments. Looking forward to seeing what they unveil tomorrow. For me, I'm fascinated by, I think we're going to head into a really interesting kind of second, third wave of VR. Oculus Quest has installed in so many, people's, they've got a massive install base now. They've not said really how much publicly, but it's pretty huge. I was just seeing some really cool, interesting, people are starting to get to grips with the technology and all the practical things like people throwing up. Some amazing experiences like Half-Life Alyx. So I think we're going to see people get into grips a lot more with that in the next few years, especially as the kind of like the technology, matures. I think the mobile technology is an interesting one because, we're getting to the point now, you look at Apple's M1 hardware, it's so powerful. When does it hit that interesting point where, you can see kind of titles like, PUBG is obviously is obviously massive on handsets around the world. But when do we start to see that graphical fidelity hit a kind of like baseline where it looks and feels amazing as well, and it's complementary to the kind of the next gen console experiences? So I think AI is another interesting area. We've just put some DLSS in we're experimenting with that, looking at the upscale kind of that has, but just looking at very practical things like AI, state in game. I'd really love to see. There's some incredible technologies out there being used at the moment, and I'm just waiting for that moment when you can see titles, RPGs, next generation RPGs with very believable characters and less kind of static dialogue trees. I think I'm quite excited to see where that goes. But I think, if I'm honest, I think a lot of the next 5 or so years is probably going to be more kind of customer led. We're going to see a lot of the younger gamers who've grown up with Roblox and Minecraft kind of coming of age, and I think the expectations of entertainment and experiences are probably going to be different to ours. And I think that's probably going to continue into much. I think that's going to probably dominate much of this decade. Personally, I think the first half at the very least, as they sort of mature. So I think we'll see a convergence of some real interesting technologies coupled with some sort of sociological sort of changes, and it'll be exciting to see, what happens when you sort of smush all that melting pot together. A blockchain's an interesting one. I love the idea of it. I just think with in-game economies where you can, I'll be really, things like CryptoKitties in the past have fascinated me, and obviously the NFT, wave is really incredible to see. I think it's going to be a matter of timing. I think, Arthur, as you said, it's probably going to be one or two when they strike it right. That might become a standard, and we may see some metaverse. That's another buzzword we're seeing at the moment. Metaverse. Everyone wants to own the metaverse. All the investors go a bit crazy for that. So I can see blockchain playing a real kind of role in that. It'll be amazing to see where I think it gets pushed in the next few years.
Great. We've got another question in the chat here. Is there any shortage of specialist skills in the game sector? Matt, you've been doing some recruiting. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, I think there's loads of great people out there, but there's loads of great companies out there they're working for. So tempting people to come to work for you is a challenge. Specialist skills wise, I think, we're an engineering focused company. We focus on engineering because that's what works for us. So we have very little in the way of art or design or anything like that. We are really powerful engineering company. So we're looking for engineers, and you look on the government website and it says there is a shortage of engineers for the gaming sector. So hence why we have an international team, because they are out there. They just may not have English as their first language. They're still fantastic people, and if you can make it work, which obviously we've proved it can, and we have really talented people who, have a completely different view of the world than we do here in the UK. That's very powerful to look a bit further afield. It's not easy. I wouldn't say it's easy to hire people outside of the UK, but we've seen some real results. We'd love to take more people on in the UK. Like I say, we've got a chap up in Scotland, and we're happy to, be flexible with the way people are working as well, because that's just going to be here to stay. So there is a shortage, yes.
So shortage of engineers in particular. Anybody else got anything to add to that one? Or
tech artists and tech animators?
Yeah,
rare as rocking horse.
There's technical roles. I would go with that as well. Yeah.
That proper intersection of art and engineering. Those people are really tough to find. I think anyone who's, senior. I think to Matt's point, senior and principal engineering. These a lot of these folks. I think that's where the pandemic's been interesting in remote hiring, because you no longer have to insist that these people uproot their family and move all the way across the country. So I think that's probably a benefit from that side of thing. But yeah, I think those two categories are always the ones the recruiters are always saying we need to find more of, I think, in the industry in general.
Great. Cheers. So next up, what type of support is most valuable for the industry moving forwards? Arthur, I'll go to you first off. You're setting out on a new venture, and what are your thoughts?
Well, one of the thoughts that I do think is really important, which actually spans back to when I was still at TT, is actually getting people into the industry at the earliest possible point. And we set up an internship program at TT with a local college. So to get 18-year-olds into work, you don't have to. There's some people just can't go to uni for whatever reason, whether it's home life or circumstance or they're just not necessarily academic, whatever it might be. There are so many talented people, and there has to be apprenticeship schemes set up to enable all those people to get into the industry, because we're preventing people getting in. So I think that's super important. And then the other thing, which comes back to where I am now, is the games industry needs more support to get all these creative people. What was it? I saw 1 in 8 companies in the UK are in the creative field. It would be much more than that if there were ways that people can get started. There's so many people with so many great ideas, but they don't know how to sort of put their best foot forward. So there has to be more accessible funding, I guess, from the government. It's great that there's video game tax relief. That's brilliant, but there should be way more than that, and there should be way more support for both getting people in, but also getting people started. So that's my plug, I guess.
Yeah, Dave, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the video games tax relief is, that's really, really important, but it's going to start getting more competitive now, I think, because, Australia's just announced their equivalent of video. Yeah, so it's like, we've got to step up, really. We've got to improve our offer in some way. So it's, so continued ongoing support from the government is really, really important, I think.
Yeah, Matt, what about yourself? We've both recently been on a scale-up program. There's the creative scale-up program, of course, from the Growth Company, and those kinds of programs are very useful, I think, aren't they?
That's been really, really cool. We've met some amazing people on those programs, some real kind of heavy hitters, from Codemasters CEO to Mediatonics founder. really people who have shared their experiences and stories have been helpful. I'd say that's super helpful as long as you can get on it. I think some accessibility there would be, and I think, given that we're all sort of, not being rude, but I thought white middle-aged men here, some of us with more hair than we'd like to perhaps have. But, we need to do more of that. We need to do more about diversity, inclusion. It's something we are very passionate about in Equinox. It's hard, because actually it all starts in education. Arthur's absolutely bang on the money. If you look at primary school education, secondary school education, the value that people are placing on art, on creative subjects is so low that, the government needs to take a different view on this entirely and go the other way. Yes, we need coders, but no, coders are not going to be able to creatively pursue what they want to make without the creative knowledge of the creative process. And this is a real big concern for me. I think that's absolutely something that Equinox are going to want to deal with. We want all shapes and sizes of people in Equinox, and it would be fabulous to have a team that was, just as diverse as it possibly can be, because that's a completely new way of doing it. And so I think education for a start, and also those programs, absolutely vital to companies like ours.
To your point there, Matt, it is actually incredibly, I said obviously the internship program at 18, it really starts in the primary schools, getting people excited about video games, getting people to understand not just video games, but creative industries generally, that there are careers there. The amount of difficulty I've had actually getting into schools to speak to these kids to try and help inspire them, it's virtually impossible. They're quite happy to get, I'm not knocking traditional industries, but they're quite happy to get an accountant or an engineer or a doctor or whatever. But to actually go in to talk about games, the games industry seems to be tarred with the negative sort of pardon the slight, but the Daily Mail sort of slight of video games. It's not. It's a creative, energizing industry, but you can't get through the door to talk, to inspire these kids. And we even tried getting it. So, you want diverse voices going into inner city schools to encourage these people to just have that dream and clutch at that straw. You can't do it. And I think, until that door is unlocked, you're going to really sort of struggle to get serious numbers sort of interested in creative industries.
Cheers. So, we've got a couple of minutes left, I think. So, Matthew, anything to add in terms of the support that the industry needs?
Yeah, I mean, let me give a shout out to UKI, the trade body, who do a really good job of lobbying government and trying to get involved both kind of locally, with and regionally, in trying to drive these sorts of schemes. I think touching upon, the point Arthur made very eloquently there, the media culture around games is very toxic in the UK. They only seem to make the headlines when somebody might have been playing, somebody stabbed somebody and they found a copy of Assassin's Creed in his house or something like that. And it's very frustrating to be seen as a sector, I think, particularly when our gross value add is multitudes larger than fishing, and not to do fishing down, but, in helping us, we've got about 10 more than 10 different nationalities working in our business. A lot of European folk, working from Europe. And I think, in order to offset kind of the post-Brexit, whichever way you lean, we won't get into that. The kind of these government initiatives on, I would call STEAM, not the platform, but science, technology, engineering, art, and maths. We use the full gamut in video games, and I'm seeing reports that the government are going to pull a load of funding out of the arts, thinking it's a waste of time. So I think there's a real lack of awareness that the skills that the video games industry uses are all essential, and more, I think there's other interesting sort of stats that the games industry is 35% more productive than other industries as well. So we're a very highly productive, value add industry for the economy. So I would really love for us to be seen as a sector of more importance, particularly by the DCMS. That would be great. So, I know media, film and TV obviously get their fair share, as we talked about. I think the video game sector, increasing VGTR Dave implied, I think there's a call to sort of increase that to 32%. R&D tax funding is another kind of area of lobbying to help startups. So, there's this kind of like fourth industrial revolution that's being built that we as a nation need to be a part of. And, it started with the BBC Micro for many of us, and there was a big, massive concerted push. And I think that's where I think we owe a lot of the games industry to those kind of early days of the BBC Micro in schools, probably at that age. And lastly, echoing Matt's sentiment, I think diversity is a big sort of thing I think we need to get a grip on in the industry, and bringing through people from all kind of diverse backgrounds, I think should be part of the priority, and it's something we're passionate about as a business. And I think as an industry, I think everyone echoes, my sentiments. So I think there's a lot more for us to do there, I think.